Hey, you, I was thinking about you, and I want to challenge the story we tell ourselves about burnout. Burnout isn't always about working too much. It's not always about being tired, and it's definitely not about needing a vacation. Sometimes burnout is grief. Grief for the version of you that keeps getting pushed aside so that other things, everything else, can keep running. If that landed, stay with me. And I need you to share this with somebody else that needs to hear this. And make sure you're subscribed because this is the kind of conversations that we have all the time. Welcome back to It's Time to Soar. This is me, Coach Katina, and this is season 3 from Unstuck to Undeniable. And today we're talking about burnout, not exhaustion, but as self-betrayal. So most conversations about burnout sound like this. Hey, you're doing too much. You need better boundaries. You need to get some rest. And while rest matters, do not get me wrong, rest matters, but it doesn't always fit. That explanation is not always it, because some of the most burned out people I know aren't overwhelmed at all. They're disconnected. They're still performing, still showing up, still delivering, but something inside them has gone quiet. And this is not just anecdotal. This is not just my opinion. This is not just something that I feel and I think. Research on burnout and engagement, frequently cited by organizations like Gallup and the World Health Organization, or WHO, show that burnout is more likely linked to lack of control, values conflict, and chronic misalignment than to work hours and hours that people spend on the job. Let that resonate. In other words, you don't burn out just because you're busy. You burn out when your work repeatedly asks you to betray what matters to you. And I say it all the time. This is not the era where we're working at a job that we hate just because we have to put food on the table. Unfortunately, some people may still be doing that. But if you need a sign that says you don't have to work at a job you hate just to put food on your table, this is your sign. And I know there are sometimes external limitations and sometimes there are internal limitations and challenges, but I want to help you get unstuck. If that is you, I want you to ask yourself, am I misaligned? Am I betraying what's important to me? And you hear people say all the time, when you do something that you love, it rarely feels like work, right? People say that because when you are validated by what you do, when you feel good about what you do, when you feel good about what you're contributing to, it releases endorphins. It makes your body feel good. It makes you excited to get to work. It makes you excited to be there. But if you are constantly challenging what your inner motivation, your inner drive, your inner value is saying is important, then your work isn't resonating. And I remember when I was at a particular role and I loved my team so much. Oh, but the work I was doing did not make my heart sing. But I could do it well, and I did it well, and I worked hard, I worked long, but I was not being validated, and inside I was chipping away at myself, and I didn't know why. I didn't equate that to the burnout I was feeling. I mean, what do your Sunday evenings look like, or the day before you go back to work? What does that look like? I remember when my Sunday evenings were full of dread, when it was like I got a knot in my stomach, and it wasn't like something was due or anything like that, but I just was not excited about the work I was doing. And and then there was one time that I worked for someone that was seedy. And when I say seedy, because their character wasn't amazing and they cut corners, and that just didn't align with my values. I didn't stay in that job long, but I remember what it felt like. So I'm asking you, have you ever been at that place where what you're doing doesn't make your heart sing, or it It just doesn't excite you. It doesn't validate you. And you realize that you're more and more exhausted every day that you stay. Talk to me in the chat. If you're just listening, talk to yourself. Like, be honest with yourself. Is that something that you might be doing? Is betraying what matters to you? A lot of people just say, just take a vacation. And how many of you, it takes you several days to unwind from vacation, to decouple, to detach from all of the stuff. And when you finally get to enjoy yourself, you finally get to relax, it's almost time to go back. And some people have it on the front and the back. It takes them a while to unwind and to detach and to really focus on relaxing. And then a day or so before the vacation ends, they get almost that same feeling. If that's you, you may be burned out. And not because you need a vacation, but because your soul is sending you a message. So that's why vacations don't always fix it. Neither do shorter work weeks, because the work is still there. And if it doesn't excite you, whether you compress it in a 4-day work week or you expand it over 6 days with shorter hours, the exhaustion isn't physical first. It's emotional. It's about how you feel about the work. It's about how you feel when you've completed it. Do you feel excited? Do you feel grateful and glad when you hit milestones, or not? It's the fatigue of saying yes when you really want to say no. It's the weariness of being praised for resilience and you're actually experiencing self-abandonment. I know that sounds harsh. Abandonment is a strong word, but think about it. What do you really want to be doing? What did you intend to be doing? And you say things like, oh, I've got a lot going on. I can't get to that right now. And it's like, oh, next quarter. Or you're going back to school next semester. Oh, next semester. And years go by and you haven't gone back. You haven't registered for classes. You haven't. And you look back and life has just happened. That's self-abandonment. What you do to, when your mind has this thing where it's meaning making, where it has to make sense of what's happening. And so when your body is trying to compensate for that, you say things like, well, I didn't really want to go back anyway, or it really wasn't that important. What you do is you minimize what used to be important to you. You tell yourself that it's not important, that it's no longer important, that it's not a driver, it's not a deal breaker, things like that, so that you feel better about abandoning what used to be very important to you. Let me give you a real world example. I've worked with people who couldn't explain their burnout. And when I work with people, we use the SOAR framework. And when we start the SOAR, the S is for self-assessment. Where are you? How are you feeling? Where are you in relation to your goals? Where are you in relation to how you want to be perceived? Just where are you? Self-assessment. And we work through that. And they'd say things like, I don't hate my job. I'm not overwhelmed. I should be grateful. So now here's the guilt. It's you're guilting yourself into feeling better. And it's like, I know this might be a crazy analogy, but when I used to babysit and when my children were really little, the triplets, when they would cry in sync. One would start and then the other two would cry. And so they're crying. And so I had this like checklist, like, okay, you're fed, you're dry, you've been burped. I would go through all of the things that I think would make them cry and then say, well, all the boxes have been checked. You shouldn't be crying. Right? And that sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly what we do to ourselves. I don't hate my job. I've got a good job. I've got a good paycheck. It pays the bills. And, I'm not overwhelmed. I should be grateful. So you guilt yourself into abandoning yourself because underneath there's something else. So one person said to me, I feel like I keep showing up for everyone else and leaving myself at the door. It's like I'll get back to you. It's like you say that to yourself. I'll get back to you. I'll satisfy that later. Let me finish this. Let me do this. Let me go here. And we pencil ourselves in and we end up rolling our desires, our needs, the things that validate us to the next day. If you use a planner or a task list or the next day, then it's the next week and then it's the next month. And before long, it's the next year. And you have gotten into a pattern, a habit that is self-betrayal. It's not a workload problem. It's just you've been betraying yourself slowly over time. And I keep saying that because it's harsh, because I'm saying it for shock value. I want you to realize that the things that you want, you deserve to get. You deserve to go after the things that you're passionate about, the things that you love doing. Why not make them part of what you do on a daily basis? Why not get paid for those? Why not be compensated? Why not bring that value to your organization? And sometimes it's available in the organization, but not in the role that you're in. So maybe we're not talking you need to leave the organization, but maybe you've gotten comfortable right where you are and you're betraying what you really want to do, what you really want to say, what you really want to contribute to for the sake of what you're doing right now. Here's the reframe I want you to sit with. Burnout is not a failure of resilience. It's a signal of misalignment. It's your system saying, this version of success is costing too much. Did you hear that? If you keep ignoring that signal, the cost doesn't disappear. It compounds. Because remember, talent gets you in the room, but positioning decides what happens next. So you're in the room and you're working and you're not fulfilled. And the signal says that the success that you're having costs too much, but you're ignoring the signal. And positioning yourself in constant self-betrayal will eventually demand payment. And if it costs too much, how are you going to pay? Notice when the resentment shows up. It's like that feeling of dread and resentment. You really are starting to complain or grumble in your mind. Pay attention to what you keep tolerating. The resentment shows up, but you keep moving through it. You push through it. And ask yourself what you've normalized that feels heavy. Burnout isn't asking you to quit everything. It's asking you to tell the truth about what no longer fits. Alignment's not selfish. It's sustainable, because the price that you're paying right now in misalignment, that's not sustainable. Burnout, whether it's in the traditional sense that people have talked about, or whether it's because of denying self, it has an end. And people end up taking lots of time off work. They take a time to regroup, or they need a vacation, or they just are unable to continue because it is not sustainable. And I want you to take a minute and think about this. Ask yourself these questions. And I mean it. Like, if you're riding in your car, wherever you are, get to a place where you can really ask yourself these questions. If you're a writer or a lister, write it down. But ask yourself, where have I been resilient when what I actually needed was honesty? You've been talking yourself through, pushing through what's a signal that's saying, stop, pause, and be honest with yourself. And the follow-up question to that, ask yourself, what would change if I stopped betraying myself to keep everything else intact? The first lie is going to be like, oh, everything's going to fall apart. Everything is. And you may have a system where you've built yourself into where people cannot survive without you. If that is the case, that is something that you can help, you can undo, you can restructure, you can reframe. You don't have to stay stuck. I hope parts of this made you uncomfortable. I hope some of this was eye-opening. If anything in this episode resonated with you, if it named something that you've been carrying quietly, you're not broken. You're becoming aware. Self-awareness is the first part of the SOAR framework. Identifying what that is. Helping high performers reconnect to alignment, voice, and clarity before burnout turns into resentment is part of the work that I do. You'll find ways to connect with me in the description. When you're ready, I'm here. I'm looking forward to SOAR with you. Next episode, we're going to talk about what happens when you're trusted, but still not promoted. Hey, you, I was thinking about you. And I think it's time for you to soar. I need you to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast, because together we're going places. And I can't wait to soar with you.